Hey guys, it's Doc Vinyl again here tonight, and we're going to finish up the Beatles discography. This is part two. I'm going to do all the albums from Rubber Soul onward, which is 1965 to 1970. One thing I'm going to not do is the Yellow Submarine soundtrack, which is kind of a compilation, and I have one special bonus I'll do at the end I'll talk a little bit about, which is kind of interesting. Alright, so I'm going to start out, no music tonight because there's so much Beatles stuff and I just want to get into it. There's a lot of little intricacies to discuss and what have you about the album releases and what have you. So this is my favorite period, of course, of the Beatles, and one of my favorite albums, of course, Rubber Soul is really one of my favorite albums by the Beatles, and we're going to start with that. I have two versions here, like what I did last time when I reviewed Revolver, which two versions. These are the last two albums that have a UK and a US version. Okay, Rubber Soul was released in 1965. This is the US mono release right here. What can I say? It's just an amazing album. The nuances of mixes between rock and roll and folk and all kinds of introductions. And Rubber Soul is really considered one of the first albums the Beatles did that really is kind of based on, more intricate music than the early period. This is really the split. Help and this album, mostly this album, and Revolver especially, are the really second stage of the Beatles, really kind of things. Now this has got great songs on it. The American release has got I've Just Seen a Face, Norwegian Wood, You Won't See Me, You Won't See Me, great song. Think for Yourself, The Word, and Michelle, all top notch. I think there's not a single bad track on this. Side 2, It's Only Love, Girl, I'm Looking Through You, In My Life, Wait, and Run for Your Life. And again, just a really amazing album. This is the American mono release with the T on the top. Capitol Records, 1965. Very, very good. This was later in 65 because Help was earlier. This is in the fall. Very, very good album. Great stuff. Now, let me talk a little bit about the UK release. Now, the UK release is a little bit different. I have a great mono version, one of my prized collections. This is a 1965 mono release. It's much glossier, as you can see from the US release. Just kind of a different cover. As you can see, the two covers right here, they're a little bit different. The UK release has different tracks, so that's the reason why I have both albums. The UK release has Drive My Car, Norwegian Wood, You Won't See Me, Nowhere Man, which of course, Drive My Car and Nowhere Man are not on the American versions. Think for Yourself, The Word, and Michelle. Now side 2 has What Goes On, Girl, I'm Looking Through You, In My Life, Wait, If I Needed Someone, and Run for Your Life. Again, the UK release has a little bit more tracks to it. This is the Parlophone release. It's in mono. This is really, one of the prize collections. This is really good stuff. Ematex, this is again a really, really, really good release. Again, my favorite album. One of the reasons why I have it in both versions. Again, just really top-notch stuff. Again, it is my favorite album. I like it because it really showcases the Beatles as a collective band, but also shows the intricacies of each individual contributions in each hit and song. The sonic landscape is changed dramatically in this album, and then we'll see as we go through the other albums too. But very, very good. Again, can't say enough about Rubber Soul. All right. Now, going on to the next one is Revolver, 1966. This is the UK release, Parlophone. It's a 180-gram release. This has Taxman, Eleanor Rigby, one of the big hits, I'm Only Sleeping, Love You Too, Here, There, and Everywhere, Yellow Submarine, and She Said, She Said. Side 2 has Good Day, Sunshine, and Your Bird Can Sing, For No One, Dr. Robert, one of the sleeper hits, I Want to Tell You, Got to Get You Into My Life, McCartney's song, and Tomorrow Never Knows. Again, this really follows up in 66 on what they were doing with Rubber Soul. And again, really, really top-notch album. This is one of my favorites too, but Rubber Soul being my favorite, this is maybe the second or third. I'll rank them after the end, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Great stuff, Revolver. And then, like I did last time, the US release has a couple of different hits, but this is the last album that would have a UK and a US with different tracks on it. Every other album after are pretty much identical. The US and UK release are the same. Again, I went over that before in the when I reviewed this album on auction, so it was pretty good. So my review. Now, moving along, and 1967 was the big hit, and of course considered in the collection of the Beatles probably some of people's most favorite albums. Of course, I'm talking about Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Just what can I say? Great concept album. Considered one of the first concept albums. Kind of hard to say. You got a couple of albums coming out in '66 and '67, all being the first concept albums. The Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, this one, Frank Zappa, Freak Out, and Days of Future Past by Moody Blues. All of them really coming around the same time, near contemporaries, all with the first idea of a concept album, which has a collective piece. This is just a great, great album, of course. Great stuff. The tracks on these are just really good. I mean, this has Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band, and segues into A Little Help from My Friends, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, of course the LSD with Lucy, Sky, and Diamonds. Remember that as a kid, which I thought was very interesting. Getting better all the time. And then fixing a hole, and then She's Leaving Home. Great stuff. And then we have For Many Years, and then Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, which is the last song. Again, all kind of segueing into each other in a very thematic points of view. Great sonic landscape on this one. Also, which is a little neat note, when this album was being recorded, it was also recorded at the same time in the same studio that Pink Floyd's first album was being recorded, which of course is Pipers at the Gates of Dawn. So there may be some bleed over, some of the psychedelia from the Pink Floyd to Lennon walking over and seeing what they were doing kind of thing. And there's a lot of intermixing, which we see. Side 2 has Getting Without You, When I'm 64, which of course is a great Paul McCartney tune. Lovely Rita, Meet-a Maid. Lovely Rita, Meet-a Maid. Great song growing up. Good Morning. And then, as it's really hard to read them on this one, Sgt. Pepper's Reprise. And then A Day in the Life, which ends off the whole album. Again, this is the Parlophone English repress. Just a great album. Sgt. Pepper's, what can I say? One of the better albums. A lot of people really like Sgt. Pepper's. Consider this one of their best albums. All right, following up in '67 with Sgt. Pepper's was another kind of concept album they did called Magical Mystery Tour, which came out later in '67. This is more of a psychedelia album with them in the costumes and just a great cover. As you can see the back, very reminiscent of a kind of a Pink Floyd cover here, very psychedelia. And then again, this had a book in it. This one doesn't originally have it, but it had a book to go along with it. Again, this is really a concept album too, and this was from The Sound of Music from the color television film called Magical Mystery Tour. And of course, this has side 1 is Magical Mystery Tour, The Fool on the Hill, Flying, Blue Jay Way, Your Mother Should Know, and I Am the Walrus, because I'm the Walrus being the very psychedelic, kind of cool, almost proggy style. Side 2 is Hello Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, another kind of progressive psychedelic thing. Penny Lane, one of my favorite tracks on it. Baby You're a Rich Man, and All You Need Is Love. And of course, All You Need Is Love is really one of the big songs on this. Very big hit. Again, this was a really big album. I mean, '67 was a great year. They did this and Sgt. Pepper's. What a tremendous year. Now, it's funny, they did 2 albums in '67, and in '68 they did 1 album, but a double album. So that's kind of cool, too. So you can see this is towards the end, and the Beatles, wow, the whole landscape of music has changed dramatically. They're really getting into it, and you can see the influences of the other bands at the time. You have other bands coming about that are putting some influences on the Beatles, like the Cream with the heavier guitar, Pink Floyd with the psychedelia, Moody Blues, really a lot of movement, Jimi Hendrix guitar style, all of this really kind of mixing together, and of course the Doors. So this really, you can see that kind of amalgamating into the 1968 release, and of course we're talking about the White Album, and this is one of the early U.S. releases with the serial number right there, as you can see. It's an early serial number release. This is really cool. This came with all kinds of paraphernalia, as you can see. They came with comes with a poster and pictures of the whole band. I mean, you know, the poster has the White Album poster has the lyrics on one side, and then has the band and all of the various interpretations on the other side. Really great stuff. And of course, the White Album really starts to show the Beatles pushing the edge, the drug influence, the whole hippie movement, and all of that. It also came with some pictures here, these kind of interesting pictures of all the band members. John Lennon and Ringo Starr, and I think I have 2 more in here. Yep, I have them all. George Harrison, and And I believe I got Paul in here. And, of course, Paul McCartney. Again, the band is changing. The hair is getting longer. You can see the impact of the hippie movement. And you definitely see it in the tracks. This album probably being one of the more edgy ones. A lot of people say that there's some filler on it. I think it's just a strong album all through it. Really, it starts with Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, Glass Onion, Obla Di Obla Da, Wild Honey Pie, the continuing story of Bungalow Bill. Then there's a beautiful George Harrison, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Happiness is a Warm Gun, which I believe is a John Lennon song. Martha, My Dear, I'm So Tired, Blackbird, and then Piggies, which of course a lot of these songs are kind of weird and unusual. Rocky Raccoon and Don't Pass Me By. Then on the other side we have Why Don't We Do It in the Road, which is a John Lennon song, kind of very risque for 1968. There's I Will, and then there's Julia. And then it's Your Birthday, which you hear all the time. It's your birthday. And everyone plays that one, of course. Your Blues, Mother Nature's Son. Everybody's got something to hide except me and my monkey. Kind of a psychedelic, crazy song. Sexy Sadie, Helter Skelter, which, of course, that has introductions with the landscapes of the murders that took place with Manson and all that stuff. So there's a lot of crossover with that. There's Long, 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 Revolution 1, Honey Pie, Savoy Truffle, Cry Baby Cry, Revolution 9, and Good Night. Now this album was slightly controversial, of course, because of course the Manson murders with Jane Tate and all of that, and the elements of that, and of course how that song is interlinked with it with Manson. But just a great album. This was released on Apple. One of the first Apple releases, I believe, because I believe Magical Mystery Tour was not Apple. Magical Mystery Tour is Capitol, I believe. Yep. So this is the first Apple and this kind of Apple release. There's also, I have another connection here. This is one of the later releases without the serial number. This is a later release. Of course, comes with all the same stuff too. Pretty cool. Comes with all the paraphernalia too. And of course, this was repressed many, many times. In England, they have the one that opens at the top, worth a lot of money, early number and what have you. Very big stuff. So again, White Album, very good. Dual album, lots of material, and you can start to see the fissures in the band, and that leads to our next album. Again, another favorite for a lot of people, and of course the 1969 release, of course, of Abbey Road. And the Abbey Road release that I have is an UK release, which is of course the same tracks, doesn't really matter. Abbey Road is really the last major album because there's a lot of tracks on Abbey Road, and the next album, Let It Be, their last album, they were kind of recorded around the same time. You can see the really differences in the bands. And of course, we all know about the Abbey Road album where Paul is barefoot, as you see, because of course they had that whole rumor going around that Paul McCartney's dead. But of course, that was like a big thing back then. Of course, he wasn't, but of course, that was a big thing. Now, Abbey Road is really one of the big albums. A lot of people cite it. It's also an album that's interesting enough, important, that will influence Alan Parsons. Alan Parsons was a sound engineer, and he had heard this album and got very inspired to work. And of course, Alan Parsons was a sound engineer on the great 1973 release, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. So you can see this influence of this album being immense. And of course, Abbey Road has Come Together, Something, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, and I Want You. Octopus's Garden, which I believe is a Ringo Starr song, and then Here Comes the Sun on side 2, which is a George Harrison song. You Never Give Me Your Money, which I think is a John Lennon song. Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, Golden Slumbers, and Carry That Weight, and then The End. Now this album is a little bit more disparate in many ways. You have that rumor of Paul McCartney being dead, the other fact that you see the longer hair, John Lennon with this massive long hair kind of look here, and the fact that this album has songs that are very inextricably tied to specific members, like Here Comes the Sun being a George Harrison song, and Octopus's Garden, and various other Sun King, and various other songs that are connected with specific members. And you can start to see the band starting to break away from each other. And of course, you'll see it again in Let It Be, which of course is really kind of a disaster recording from what I've heard, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And Abbey Road is really the last collective effort of the Beatles, really together. And of course, you have the Yoko Ono story coming in, that she kind of broke up the band. Of course, that's kind of silly. I mean, I think that the band was going in different directions anyways, because as soon as their last album comes out, we'll see that each one of the band members starts to make their own albums. John, Paul, and George, all with strong efforts. So yeah, Abbey Road, really very important, and one of the really great album, and considered a lot of people's favorite Beatles album. Now the last album I'm going to do is my mother's copy, which is great, is of course Let It Be, Growing Up. Now Let It Be was kind of a collective effort and was kind of lots of times leftovers. As you can see, they recorded it on top of a building, as you saw right there. And the recording of this album was really kind of very difficult because the members were fighting, they weren't getting along. And this was an extension. You can see that kind of in some of the pictures here too, especially this one with Paul, if you look up close. And this album really has some great tracks on it, and they were very separate. Again, a lot of these was recorded around the same time as Abbey Road 2. This has Two of Us, I Dig a Pony, Across the Universe, I Me Mine, Dig It, Let It Be, and Maggie May. Side 2 is I've Got a Feeling, One After 909, The Long and Winding Road, which of course I believe is a George Harrison song, For You Blue, and then Get Back. It's a great album, great sound on it, but it's really the last song of the Beatles. It's the end of an era, end of the band. Comes out in 1970, and again, great stuff, really, really good stuff. Okay, now I had a bonus one before I do the rankings, and then we'll finish up. The bonus album that I wanted to do, talked to John over at Max J Records, and of course that's called The Beatles Yesterday and Today. Now technically this is really a compilation album, but it's one of the highly collectible albums. Now this is an original Capitol mono release, but there are three different versions of this. This is the Butcher album, this is the Trunk album, and then there's the Butcher album, of course, being worth the most with the butchered parts and the babies and them sitting down. And then they covered it up with this cover, which has, and you can peel it in the bottom. This isn't one of them. That's worth a lot of money too. Highly collectible those albums are. And it's really about the cover, not so much the album, because the albums are all the same. This has Drive My Car, I'm Only Sleeping, Nowhere Man, Dr. Robert, Yesterday, Act Naturally. Side 2 is And Your Bird Can Sing, and If I Needed Someone, We Can Work It Out, What Goes On, and Day Tripper. And again, this is really a collection of songs from Rubber Soul, and Revolver, and a couple other albums. Very big. This is a very big album. It's highly collectible because of the highly controversial cover that they did, the Butcher cover that they called the Butcher cover. And then of course they had the cover over it, which this cover was. That one's worth a lot too, because if you peel it underneath, you can see the Butcher cover. Now this is the regular release, and one of the reasons is they pulled it off the market because it was so controversial, and they just pasted over this cover over top of it. And of course the Butcher cover was still underneath it, which is kind of neat. Again, highly collectible, a Butcher cover in mint condition, big bucks. Probably one of the most expensive Beatles albums. So yeah, very good stuff. Okay. So let's rank them. I'm going to rank the albums real quick. My rankings may not go along with yours, but again, that's what the comment section's for. I'd like to hear what you guys got to say, okay? So when you subscribe, let me know. Of course, my first album, which I already stated, is of course Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul's #1 for me. I think it's the best album they did. Personally, it's my favorite album. I love every song on it. I can listen to it ad nauseum. It is really one of the only Beatles albums I can really listen to all the time, and I always reach for this album. Totally one of my favorites. Okay. Now, after Rubber Soul, it gets a little tight because they're all really good songs, good albums. But I'm gonna go with my next favorite album, and of course that's Sgt. Pepper's. I just love Sgt. Pepper's. I just remember it as a kid. My music teacher, in I think 5th grade, did a whole documentary on it and talked about the album. And it was really one of my introductions at 4th and 5th grade to rock and roll music and explaining all the different songs and the concept of this. And I do love the idea of the album and the influence of it. And of course, we're only in it for the money and lumpy gravy, which of course is Frank Zappa. He kind of parodies this cover, which is kind of cool too. So very good stuff. That's #2. And #3 would be Revolver. Love this album. This is a great album. It has a lot of some of my favorite songs on it. I love Taxman. I love Good Day Sunshine. Got You in My Life, one of my favorite songs there. And Dr. Robert. Love Dr. Robert. Just a really good album. I love it because it's almost like a follow-up to Rubber Soul. Excuse me. I gotta get that. And that's one of the reasons why I really like this album a lot. Okay? So that's #3. #4, Abbey Road. Abbey Road's really good. I like Abbey Road. I don't like it as many as other people like it. I can see it's kind of the beginning of the end of the Beatles, but I do like it. It has some really great songs on it. Here Comes the Sun is one of my favorites. She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, I love. Come Together is really good, and just really good. Great effort, and it's really good because it's a swan song of the Beatles, really. Now coming down to the last couple, there's Magical Mystery Tour is the next one. As I rank number 1, 2, 3, 4. This is ranked #5. This has a couple of great songs on it too. One of my favorites is Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields Forever, which of course I always played. All You Need Is Love is on this. And this is really cool too, because this is really kind of in the heyday, the pinnacle of their career, with the movie and everything. The movie's kind of neat too, so it's kind of have a nice way about it. It's really, really good. Some great some gems on this, hidden tracks. Great one. And then the last two are really simple. I go with the White Album. I like the White Album a lot. I like certain tracks on it, but I think it's kind of a cumbersome album. It's got a lot of, it's got some filler on it. I kind of have to say they could have cut it down to one album, might have been better, but it is cool. Some of my favorite songs on this, Back in the USSR, which everyone loves. I love Blackbird. Piggies is kind of interesting. Happiness is a Warm Gun. Why My Guitar Gently Weeps. Everyone loves that one of my favorites. Everybody's got something to hide with me and my monkey, which is kind of neat. I love Why Don't We Do It in the Road? Why don't we do it in the road? Great John Lennon kind of guttural, kind of love it. Great stuff though. Do like the White Album, good stuff. And then my least favorite of the Beatles of this era is Let It Be. And the reason for it is that Let It Be is really not a collective effort. It's really singular of each band member, and it's kind of a lead off from Abbey Road. It does have one or two really super tracks on it. Of course, Maggie May's great. I love Let It Be. Get Back is really good. I've Got Feelings pretty good, and The Long and Winding Road. It is a good album, but it seems to be more like if you combine this and Abbey Road for a double album being their last album, that would have been cool rather than, and then cut down White Album. That's just my opinion. But again, I'd like to know what you guys think. Let me know. And again, that's the Beatles Part 2. We kind of wrapped them up. Again, I didn't do Yellow Submarine, but I did everything else. Again, that's kind of a compilation really too, so I didn't want to do compilations. So I'd like to know what you guys got to say. I hope you liked it, and we're going to be going back to doing some other cool stuff. I got a couple of other ideas for shows that I'll be introducing, which will be kind of cool. We'll talk about different bands and what have you. So I thought I'd do the Beatles, get them out of the way, and there's some other big bands coming up too that I have to do discographies of course, you know, from this time period. So you guys stay safe. I'll talk to you later.